You guys go ahead and have a seat. And if you got a Bible, open up to Esther chapter 1, or if you got a Bible from the seat back in front of you, should be page 354. And if you got your own Bible, it goes Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs. So if you know one of those Bibles, you can probably find Esther based off of that. And so Esther chapter 1, we were going to do this last week, and then I thought, you're going to see from the message today that it's not the best Mother's Day sermon. So we saved it for today instead. So I hope you bear with me, because this is a very history-based lesson. You ready? I hope you can live with me and don't hate me, because I will be talking a lot about real events in history that happened. Even though this is a book of the Bible, these are rooted in real events that we get to look at and see. Okay? So here's where we're going to go. We're going to read, just to start it off, set the scene, Esther chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. Here it is. Now in the days of Ahasuerus, which is also a name, which is the Hebrew name for the Persian name, which is Xerxes or something like that, which is the Greek name Xerxes. You heard that name before? So that's the character we're looking at, Xerxes. Now in the days of Xerxes, the Xerxes who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. And in those days, when King Xerxes, Ahasuerus, sat on the royal throne in Susa, which is the citadel, the third year of his reign, and it goes on after that. So right here we see the scene is right after. This is one of the last books in the Bible, in the Old Testament, written, okay? So we have the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, which take place right after Israel gets out of captivity and comes back home. Now this book takes place about a generation or two after all of that happens, okay? So you know the story. Israel does bad. Israel's dumb and rejects God over and over and over again. And so God sends the Babylonians in and takes over Israel, right? And then what happens is after 70 years, this bigger nation, Persia, rises up and comes over and wipes out the Babylonians. And now this is King Darius, or King Cyrus. He has these slaves in his town and his nation and his kingdom. And he says, well, I don't want to keep any slaves, so you guys are free to go home. And that's when the Israelites go home. But some of the Israelites, some of the Jewish people, stay in Persia, stay in the big kingdom. And if you want to know how big it is, this is about the realm, the region that King Xerxes reigns over. I mean, this is a massive world power of this time, because at this time, in about 480 BC, give or take a couple years, that's the world. That's about all they know about the world, and he owns it all. So for all intents and purposes, King Xerxes is the king of the world. Now this is the guy we're dealing with. And King Xerxes, his dad was Darius, his dad was Cyrus, and it's this line of people who have freed the Jewish people, and now we have another king show up on the scene, and that's Xerxes. Now, even though this book does not mention God, did you know that? The book of Esther does not mention God, Yahweh, anywhere. We can see God working in the life of Xerxes, in the life of Esther, and in the life of the many characters of this book. We see his themes, his compassion and his love for his people present in these words, even though he is not visibly present. And so what I want with this series, what I want with this is for you, even though you might not see God physically in your life, even though you might not see God working in your life, you can see how God is behind the scenes and working in those scenes. Do we follow? That's what I want for this entire book as we study through this, okay? But today, we're going to see the main character is not necessarily God, because he's not mentioned. The main character is this guy, Xerxes, this king, the guy who's ruling over the world. He's got it all, and he's ruling over this place. He is the guy that we spend most of our time looking at, most of our time observing what's going on with him. And if you remember our study in Ecclesiastes, he's kind of the opposite view of Solomon. Okay? Solomon is the world power. He's got all the wealth, all the money, everything you could want in life. And he tries to find the meaning of life and finds that the meaning of life is God. And then we see Xerxes as kind of the opposite. Here's how Solomon describes this in Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 16. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child and your princes feast in the morning. So he's just kind of setting up. If you have a king like this, you are a foolish nation. Woe to you. You are doomed for destruction. And we're going to see today, I hope you'll see, that Xerxes is this king that is, woe to you, a foolish king. The opposite view of Solomon. He's a spoiled rich kid. He doesn't go into war with his people. He just sits in the palace and eats grapes all day and gets fanned by palm trees. That's his life. He's got a lazy, laid-back life. He's a fool that's in command of the world's largest army of the time. Now, if you've seen the movie 300, I can't recommend you see it because there's some debauchery and not good things in that, so don't watch it. But if you have already seen it in the past in your sinful days, then you'll understand that this Xerxes is the guy that we're talking about. And in that movie, it very much depicts Xerxes as this guy who views himself as king of the world, views himself as a god among men, and views himself as the head honcho. And all he cares about is pleasing myself. And now I love this verse in Proverbs, which also describes Xerxes. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit, a proud spirit comes before the fall. Now what we're going to see is that Xerxes is one of the proudest men that we will ever read in these scriptures. Now to give you an example, there's a historical account, the Greek historian Herodotus, a guy who went all over the place and was very fascinated with Xerxes and very fascinated with the Persian Empire, and he lived not too long after Xerxes. And what he does is he goes and he records what happens with Xerxes and his attack, and he tries to invade Greece, and here's what happens. They fail. A storm comes, waters come, rage over, the ocean rises up, and bad things happen. The Greek or the Persian army gets defeated because of natural events, and so what does Xerxes do as the proud man? He orders the waters to be whipped. Now, that's not a joke. He orders the people to go out there with whips and smack the water for its disobedience. Now, just imagine that proud man who thinks he can spank the ocean itself because it disobeyed him. That's the guy we're dealing with today. This is the proud man that we get to observe and look at the life of today. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at many different ways, 3 different ways that Xerxes is a proud man. Things that Xerxes puts his pride in rather than putting his pride in God. He misplaces his pride and puts it most of all in himself, but things that he also has and does. So let's get on to this. Here's what he does. And by the way, it's going to show that Xerxes is pretty immature, like the child in Ecclesiastes. Woe to you when your king is a child, an immature person. And that's what we're going to see today. And first of all, we're going to see that Xerxes puts his pride in his wealth. He's got a lot of money, and so he's proud of that, and so he wants to show off that wealth. He wants to let everybody know that he has wealth. He's got it all, and he doesn't want anybody else to be in the dark about that knowledge. He wants everybody to know he's got the money. Look at verse 3 and 4 with me. In the 3rd year of his reign. Okay, so he's not been king for a whole long time, but he's got a little bit of experience under his belt. In his 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media and the nobles and the governors and the provinces were before him. So he throws a party, a feast, and he invites only the important people. Only the important people. Only the other people who think that they have some money. And he says, you think you have money? Come, I'm going to show you a party. Come look at my money. Come look at my wealth. Come see what's going on. Now look at verse 4. This is what's I think is bizarre and hilarious, and I don't understand how he did it. Now while he showed the riches of his royal glory, and by the way, that word glory, it's a very worship-intensive word. So he's kind of wanting these people to worship him in his glory because he's very proud of it in his wealth. So show off his royal glory and the splendor and the pomp of his greatness for many days. In fact, 180 days. Anybody do the math on that? 180 days? That's 6 months. That's half a year that this guy is throwing a party saying, look at how much money I have. If you think I'm going to run out of resources, you're a fool. I'm going to feed you for 6 months, probably up to 10,000, 15,000 people coming, hanging out at his house for 6 months. And he's just going to throw a party for them, going to give them everything they want, all the food, all the wine, it's extravagant, over the top, and he gives them all of this stuff. He showed the riches of his glory and the splendor of his pomp and greatness. He just wants to show off his wealth. So he invites all the wealthy people for 6 months, bask in my wealth, bask in my money. It's amazing. Now, do you guys remember the TV show, The Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous? That's what Xerxes is trying to do. He creates his own production company, creates his own TV station, invents television for the sake of this, and then invites camera crew to come in and say, hey, film my life. Let these people know how wealthy I am. You got a stretch limousine. That's really cool. I have a stretch house. You got a stretch... You got something, I've got it better. That's what Xerxes is doing in this. Compare your wealth with my wealth, and mine is better. That's what that TV show is about, by the way. If you think you have a swimming pool, well, too bad. Their whole top floor of their house is a swimming pool. You got a nice hot tub? Well, their whole kitchen is a hot tub. So you can cook and bathe in the hot tub. He's got it. Lifestyles of the rich and famous. Xerxes is better. That's what this is meant to do, to show off his wealth, to say, hey, look at how great I am. Look at how amazing this is. And you know how wealthy I am? You want a drink? Here, I'll give you a drink. Come for 6 months, have a drink whatever you want. And he's showing off and bragging about his wealth. Okay, now after those 6 months, okay, for 6 months, partying with the richest, the wealthiest people, showing off even to the wealthiest people that I'm richer than you, and then he invites everybody. Look at verse 5. After those 6 months, when these days were completed, after the 6 months were done, the king Xerxes gave for all the people present in Susa, the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting for 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. So after he invites all of the wealthiest people, hey, look at how rich I am, now he invites the poorest people and the richest people, everybody, it doesn't matter, come party in my house for a week, and I'll show you how rich I am. Now, anybody been to a party and they have little goodie bags, and they give you a goodie bag and it's got a candy bar and a soda bottle, stuff like that? Anybody else? Am I the only one who got a goodie bag going to birthday parties? So you go to a birthday party and you're going to get a goodie bag. You know what Xerxes' goodie bag is for them? Look on to verse 7 and verse 8. Drinks were served in golden vessels of different kinds. Royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king. Hey, look, you want a take-home present? Here's a gold goblet. Okay, take it home. This is more money than some of these poor people have ever seen in their lives. It's more money than their house is worth. And you're just going to give this to me? That's my goodie bag? That is what Xerxes does with him. He says, here, take this, enjoy this. Now, I'm going to backtrack again, now to verse 5 again. Did you see this? He talked about the citadel in Susa. Susa is a town, the citadel being the palace, okay? Now, the reason he has to specify that is because that's his second palace. That's not even the primary palace. You know how Air Force One, there are 2 airplanes that are both designated Air Force One, and depending on the day, they'll pick one over the other? If you guys don't know this, go look it up. It's pretty interesting, pretty fascinating, and they figure out which one they want to have that day, whichever one's in better condition. Now, Xerxes, he's got 2 palaces, one for the summer, one for the winter. It gets too hot up in one place, I'm going to go to this other place. If it gets too cold in this place, I'm going to go to this other place. He's got 2 homes. Now, if anybody has 2 homes, you're rich, okay? Now, Solomon, he's got 2 palaces, not just 2 houses, 2 palaces. He's rich. Come look at my secondary, my backup palace, and it's more great than anything you have ever seen. And now, look at verse 6 now. This is where we really get into his extravagance and his really showing off for them. Now, there were white cotton curtains. Okay, anybody ever owned a white t-shirt? I have a white t-shirt. I have 2 white t-shirts at my house on my dresser that I have spilled stuff on, and I cannot get the stains out, and I will never wear them again because they are stained forever. Do you know how difficult it is to keep white? It's not the easiest thing. You know what Solomon does? He says, I'm going to get a whole bunch of white curtains and put them on the windows. I'm just going to put it, every window is going to have a white curtain, and it's going to be pristine and white. Okay, and then on top of that, after the white curtains, he says, white cotton curtains, violet hangings fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple. Okay, so purple, I know you guys have heard this before, purple is wealthy. That is a sign for royalty, sign for wealthy, because purple dye is hard to come by. It's hard to find purple dye to make purple clothes. Now, what Xerxes does, he doesn't have purple clothes. He says, I have so much purple, I'm going to put it on the windows. I'm not going to wear it as my clothing. It's just going to be something to hang on the wall. Just something, oh, look, that's neat. Just have it on the wall. And again, this is a palace. Every single window, by the way, the white curtains, those are just the blinds. And then the purple, those are the decorative things. And he's just showing off. Just saying, look at how fascinating that is. Look how rich I am. I can afford this. I can keep that purple. I can keep that white. I've got it. And now look how they're stuck up there. Look how they're hanging up there. Fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rods. Okay, anybody got curtain rods in your house? You put that above the door. Typically it's made of aluminum or some other cheap something, okay? Solomon, he says, well, Xerxes says, I got this pile of silver over here. What can I do with that? I'll make a curtain rod out of it. Yeah, I'll just make a stick, put it over my window, and hang the curtains from that. I would love to have enough money to put silver on my windows to hang the curtains from. He's making silver coat hangers, silver, he's got everything just made out of silver and gold because all those other materials, all those other metals are lesser. So he's just trying to show off and trying to let these people know, I'm better than you and I know it. Here it is. After the silver rods, marble pillars. Marble is pretty expensive, pretty heavy. And he's saying we're going to need something to separate the floor from the ceiling. Might as well be the best stone we've got. So he makes marble pillars. And then after the marble pillars, couches of gold and silver. He says, we have so much gold and silver. We're going to make the very seat you're sitting on gold and silver because why not? I've got it. It can happen. I'm just going to do it. After the couches, and now we get into the floor itself. And I want you to know, it's very symbolic because what you walk over, you're saying that is beneath me, that is below me. And he's going to line his floors with things that are more expensive than your house. Okay, ready for this? He says, and on silver couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. Okay, so you know all your jewelry you have, ladies, that cost, you guys were just talking about the crown jewels in England last night. Billions of dollars worth of jewels in a room behind glass. And you know what Xerxes did with that billions of dollars? He put it in the floor so you can walk on top of it. That's what Xerxes, that's how wealthy he is, that he can say, yeah, that's concrete. That's what that is. There's nothing more to that. That's just a brick to walk over. A fancy jewel, mother of pearl, things that cost more than my house, more than my car, more than my parents' house, and you're walking on top of it. That's how wealthy this guy is. He's just showing off and letting you know that he is better than you. And remember, after the party, you get to take home the gold cup. Verses 7. Drinks were served in golden vessels, vessels of different kinds, and royal wine. Okay, there's two different kinds of wine. There's wine and then there's royal wine. I know you think there's bottled and boxed wine. No, there's royal and not royal. And Xerxes, I'm going to get those mixed up a lot. Xerxes, he's got royal wine, the best of the best of the best. Nobody else has got wine like this. It's been fermented for 300 years. It's better than your wine. And he's going to, drink it. Go ahead. However much you want. Look at this, verse 7 or verse 8 now. And drinking was according to this edict. He says, okay, you're going to drink however much I declare. There is no compulsion. The only rule about drinking is there are no rules. Drink away. Drink as much, drink as little for a week. And do you know how drunk a person can get in a week of drinking however much wine they want? Of the best wine, the most alcoholic wine, they can get pretty drunk. And so he's just trying to show off this wine that costs $3,000 a bottle. He says, just drink it. Just drink all of it that you want, however much you want. The only rule is, there is no rule. Just drink whatever. It's free. It's for you. Enjoy. All of this is to show off Xerxes, his wealth. He's very proud of his wealth. He's very arrogant about it. And so he says, come look, take a glimpse into the life of a rich and famous person and see that your life is not as good as my life. That's the whole point of this first section there of Xerxes in his life. Just trying to say, I am better than you. Okay, so Xerxes, he puts his pride first of all in his wealth, in his money. And now here's the next one. Xerxes puts his pride in women. In women. Now at this time, women aren't necessarily treated as good as they are today. Women are basically property unless you get married to a king, and then you're probably in a better standing. So here's the deal on what's going on. During this time, when they have a big party, a big feast, everybody's invited, men and women alike. Husbands and wives come, party, hang out together. But then, whenever the guys get really drunk, because there's no compulsion, women not really want to hang out with the drunk guys. You ever been around a drunk, belligerent jerk, women? You don't really want to be around them, right? Are you following along? So they say, after the guys get drunk, we'll just go off on our own. So here's what it is. Esther 1:9. Now Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus or King Xerxes. So she decides, okay, now they're drunk. Let's just go have our own party. We're going to sip on our tea, have a nice, eloquent, beautiful time. It'll be nice, calm. We won't have to be worrying about those drunk idiots hitting on us. It'll be safer here. So that's what they do. But the implication there is that there are women that don't get invited to that party. You know who those women are? Those are the concubines, the prostitutes. The women that, by the way, again, this is where we go back to the movie 300. Don't watch it. But if you do, or if you have, don't watch it. There's a scene in there where there is just debauchery, women, concubines surrounding Xerxes and his just surrounding him. He's got dozens of women around him. And so what they would do at this party is they would do what they do. And that's what their job was. And he's very proud of that because he's throwing this party for his generals, for his political leaders for 6 months. And he's going to have his women coming around doing their womanly things. And then during the 7 days, they're going to have these poor people come in and they're going to be doing the same thing, just using and abusing women. And Solomon, or Xerxes, he's just lavishing it on. He's just saying, yeah, come on, look at how great I am. This is amazing. Now, it's not stated, but it's implied that Xerxes has a lot of these prostitutes rolling around, coming around. And then, after he gets drunk, okay, look at verse 10 now. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine. So he's been drinking straight for 7 days. He's drunk as can be. By the way, he would get drunk, go to sleep, wake up, still drunk, start drinking again, and stay drunk all day. That's what he's doing. And on the 7th day, it's all building up to this. And he commanded these 7 guys, Mehuman, Biztha, Harbana, Bigtha, a bunch of names that you don't really need to know, fancy names. But then he says, they are 7 eunuchs. By the way, 7 eunuchs mean that they were castrized. Everybody follow along. We don't need to have any more discussion on that. And the reason for that being is that he doesn't want them to be tempted by his wife, by his concubines, by his women. So he has these special groups to take care of his women so that they will not do anything that he would like to do. Make sense? Everybody follow along? Did I toe around that without you guys? Okay. So he's got these 7 guys that go and get his queen. And look what happens. Go in the presence of King, here it is, the 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Xerxes to bring Vashti before the king with her royal crown in order to show the peoples and the princes her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. Now, we got to talk about this name Vashti real quick, okay? Vashti is the Persian name for beautiful, okay? So it's like naming your daughter Bonita. It means beautiful. Her name, we don't know if that's her actual name or if that's just her title or a nickname given, but we know that she embodies beauty. Everything beautiful, that if you think a woman is beautiful, that is Vashti, okay? And then King says, go bring her so that she can show off. Now, look at the verb used in there. Verse 11, bring Vashti before the king with her royal crown in order to show the peoples. That's the same word that we talked about way back in chapter 1, verse 4. While he showed the riches, the same word. I'm going to show you how wealthy I am. Now I'm going to show you the most beautiful woman in the world, and she's mine. He's showing her off, putting her on display. She is the trophy wife of King Xerxes. He just wants everybody to look and say, how beautiful is she? I wish that were my wife. And Xerxes says, that's mine. That's my wife. And also the implication here, look again to verse 11. Before the king with her royal crown. Now that royal crown is going to be some decorative headdress or something, and a lot of speculation is on whether or not she'll be wearing anything else. You follow? Wear the fancy hat, but nothing else. Come show off. Let everybody see how beautiful you are so that I can glory in your beauty because you are mine. That's what Xerxes does in this case. But if you read the rest of the story, Vashti's smarter than that. Vashti's a little more she doesn't want that to happen. So here we go, verse 12. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, delivered by the eunuchs. At this the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him. And the king said to the wise men who knew the times, who were wise, who knew everything, for this was the king's procedure toward all who were versed in the law and judgment, the men next to him being Karshana, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsana, and Memukim. Did I get all those names right? And the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who saw the king's face and sat first in the kingdom. They're wise, they're close to the king, they are the president's cabinet, the guys who advise him and give him direction. And verse 15, according to the law, what is to be done to Queen Vashti because she has not performed the command of King Ahasuerus, of King Xerxes, delivered by the eunuchs. So King Xerxes, he says, hey, come bring my wife so that I can show her off to my people, show her off and let them know how beautiful my wife is. And then she refuses, and King gets mad. King gets real ticked off, okay? And what does he do? He tries to find every lawful way to prosecute her because he's so mad that he could not show off her beauty. He's not mad that he couldn't have a loving relationship. He wasn't mad because he couldn't have a conversation with his wife. He's mad because she didn't come act like an erotic dancer for him and his friends. That's what he's upset about. Not that she refused to dine with him, because she refused to show off and be an object of pleasure for Xerxes. And he takes very high pride in his women, in Vashti, in his concubines, in his prostitutes. He's very proud in the fact that he's collected the most beautiful women, and the most beautiful of them all is his wife. Whenever she refuses, he tries to sue her so that she has to, or he gets some recompense for that. So Xerxes, he puts his pride in his wealth. Look at how much money I have. And then he puts his pride in his women. Look at how the beautiful women I have. And now here's the last one. Xerxes, he puts pride in his warrant. Not warrant as in a arrest warrant, but warrant as in his authority, the area that he has power over. He has authority, he has power, he has some say-so, being the king of Persia, being the king of the world. He's got some authority, and he's proud about that. And that's why he asks, hey, what can I do to lord my power over Vashti? What can I do to display my power over her and over the rest of the people? Now, a lot of these things, they would have been inherited with Xerxes. Remember, he didn't work for them. He didn't work hard to be king. He just happened to be the son of the king and gets it all. And that's what he's proud about, these things that he just happened to inherit. Look at verse 16, and we're going to read through verse 20, so a good little section here. Memucan, one of the 7 wise guys that are around him, telling him, advising him, Memucan said in the presence of the king and the officials, not only against the king, he says, not only has she gone against what you say, but also, not only against the king has Queen Vashti done wrong, but also against all the officials and all the peoples who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will be made known to all women, causing them to look at their husbands with contempt, since they will say, well, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, and she did not come. Now this very day, the noble women of Persia and Media, who have heard of the queen's behavior, will say the same to all of the king's officials, and there will be contempt and wrath in plenty. Now, if it please the king, let a royal order go out before him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it may not be replaced, that Vashti is never again to come before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. So when the decree made by the king is proclaimed throughout all his kingdom, for it is vast, all women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. So here's what Memucan's suggestion is. If you don't do anything, all of the women are going to hear about that, and they're going to stop respecting their husbands. So you better make an example out of them. Now, here's the joke I was going to tell at that point, but I didn't want to ruin it. Thank you. So there's a professor who comes to class, okay? An older guy comes to class, and every day sets up on the podium a tennis ball. Never says anything about it, never addresses the tennis ball, and just goes on with his lecture. Goes on with the lecture normal, and he does that every single day. Comes in, sets the tennis ball down, goes on with the lecture. Never says anything about it. And then one day, a couple weeks into class, one of the kids in the back falls asleep in class. So what does the professor do? Picks up that tennis ball without missing a beat, talking the whole time, giving the lecture, throws that tennis ball, pegs the kid right on the head, wakes him up, shocks him, and the professor never misses a beat, never addresses it, never says anything about it. He just goes on with the lecture. And then the next day, what he does is he walks in, he sets a baseball on the table. Now, he's making an example of that person. And that's what Memucan, that's what this wise man suggests. Make an example out of her. Punish her so that nobody else will be tempted to do that same thing. Because if she rejected you, how many other women will reject their husbands? And so that's his suggestion. That's his idea for Xerxes. And what does Xerxes do? Actually, I want to look at this real quick. Because there's a little bit of flattery that this guy gives to Xerxes. Look at verse 19. Let a royal order go out from him. Let this be known that this is from the highest person in all of the land. Let a royal order go out from him so that it may not be repealed. Let this be permanent. And he's just trying to flatter the king, saying, look at how much warrant, look at how much authority you have. It can be permanent. Send it out there and let everybody know it forever. And then verse 20, and throughout, let it be sent to all of his kingdom. It is vast. It is big. And he's just trying to flatter him and say, look at how wide-stretching your reach is, how wide-stretching your authority is, how permanent it can be. And Xerxes, he puffs up a little bit. His chest gets a little big. He says, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. In verse 21 and 22. This advice pleased the king and the princes, and the king did as Memucan proposed, he said, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll show them how strong, I'll show them how much power I have, I'll show them how much warrant I have in this land, and I'll make it permanent. Verse 22, he sent letters to all the royal provinces, to every province in its own script, and to every people in its own language, that every man be master in his own household and speak according to the language of his people. Let everybody know about it, no matter what language, no matter where they came from. Let them know that they must obey their husband. And he said, yeah, that'll make me feel really, really good. Now, it's what. Can I take a couple minutes here and go backtrack a little bit? Okay, so way back in the very beginning of this chapter, he throws the 6-month party. You want to know why he throws that 6-month party? It's because his dad got killed trying to invade Greece. And so he's thinking, I'm now going to try and invade Greece. So he invites all of his princes over, all of the generals, all those people, to show off before him. And by showing them his wealth and impressing them, he is trying to show them that he himself has a lot of power and a lot of authority. Now, the example being, whenever girls go out on a date with a boy, okay, the boy's going to show up and he's going to take her to the nicest restaurant in town, okay? That's what's going to happen. I'm going to show you how wealthy I am by taking you to El Gallito and give you a nice chicken on the beach, right? He's just trying to flatter her up. That's what the king is doing, trying to flatter these guys up, let them know how much power and authority that I have. And that's what he's doing in that situation. And Xerxes loves putting pride in his warrant, in his authority, in his power that he can lord over people. Now, throughout this passage, Xerxes, I hope, can be an example of what not to be. And I hope you realize why I didn't preach this last week. Xerxes is an example of how not to be, because he puts his pride in his physical things, his physical prowess, his wealth and his women and his warrant. He puts his pride in things of this earth, and we are told in Scripture not to put our pride in things of the earth. So how about with wealth? Xerxes has a lot of money, and how many of us still buy the fancy car? Still buy the better house. Build a nice deck, get a nice swimming pool, get a nice big slide on there, a nice big diving board. Look at my beautiful pond. We like to get the nicest gadgets, the nicest things, get the nicest house, get the coolest house, nicest car with the butt warmers. You know what I'm talking about? The fancy ones. My mom's car has seat coolers as well. I didn't know that was a thing. We still put our pride in our wealth, in our material possessions. How about not necessarily women, but how about other people, other family members? Anybody post on Facebook this week? Oh, my kid, my grandkid, they're doing so great. I love them. Look at there's a picture of them walking across the stage or doing this or doing that. Look how great they are. How many people's Facebook is solely dedicated to your grandkid? Where people, if you look at your Facebook, they're never going to see anything about you. They're only going to see about your kids or your grandkids. Or how about instead of your women or your family, how about the warrant, your authority? You're proud of your job. You're proud of having power over somebody else. Or you talk back to me, I can fire you. Or you're proud of having that authority, proud of having that power over somebody else. And we still put our pride in ourselves, whether it be our physical money or our physical things that we own, or whether it be our family, or whether it be our position over somebody else. I'm going to remind you of this verse. Pride, when it's only put in ourselves, goes before destruction. Now, by the way, is Persia still a country? Is Persia still the world power? Is Xerxes still in power? Is Xerxes a god? He put his pride in himself, and destruction followed him. A haughty spirit, a proud spirit goes before the fall. Now here's what we are supposed to put pride in, because we still have pride. As human beings, pride, boasting is part of our life. Now here is what we are supposed to put it in. 1 Corinthians 1:31. Let the one who boasts, let the one who has pride boast. Put pride in the Lord. Not what you have done, not what you have accumulated, not what you do or have or whatever. Boast in Christ Jesus rather than in your family or your money or your job, or whatever it be. Boast in the Lord instead. Now you guys can come up and play. Xerxes is the antagonist, the opposite side, the flip side of Solomon. Solomon's a wise guy, rich, wealthy, has this great kingdom, and uses all of his resources to search out and find God. Xerxes, on the other hand, believes himself to be God, and only puts his pride in himself, puts it in his material possessions. Now here's my plea for you and I. Don't be a fool like Xerxes, because pride comes before the fall.